وتغلق بها أبواب الشر والتعسير أنت مولانا فنعم المولى ونعم النصير. So brothers, I've been told, the sister said the brothers need this one. So it should be fun inshallah, but jokes aside, a couple of things. If anybody feels triggered or upset by the conversation, feel free to get some air. That's really important, because sometimes having these conversations can bring back really, really bad memories and then trigger a psychological response and physical response. So if you feel like I need some air, just bismillah, no problem, and then come back when you're ready. And the examples are going to give are real life examples, but the names have to be changed for obvious reasons. For obvious reasons, inshallah. Okay, so this is really important because let's just talk about the Muslims. So 1/3 of Muslim marriages are ending in divorce, according to one of my friends who's a mufti who's very much involved with Muslim marriages. 1/3. And so it's ajib, isn't it? That's a lot. And
sorry, just yesterday my cousin.
Divorced. So 3 months. So this is the thing, we're seeing people, on the outward, when you look at them, just look at them, and or even if you know them, wonderful human being, brother, sister, what do you think? This perfect match. And we're seeing increasingly more and more, they just can't live together. And it's like, what is going on? Like, what is going on? And so it's all about understanding human behavior. And when a human being understands why they behave in a certain way, what makes them, go mad, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, how they respond, or how they choose to respond. When you begin to know yourself, a lot makes sense in your life, and also you can calibrate to make it work for the future, basically. Why is it a problem that Muslim marriages are breaking down? It's 1/3 is divorce. Why is it a big problem?
Question.
Yeah, ultimately.
The society.
Yeah, so who does it affect most? The kids. Especially when children are involved. If there's a situation where the Muslim household is dysfunctional, toxic, or there's separation, psychologists say each child has a 40% increase in probability of developing a mental health problem at some point in their adult life. So basically it just messes up the kids. And it's really important actually to be aware of that, because our the model is is to have a family that drives the ummah of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam forward. That's one of the main purposes is for the ummah. And then you put the problem in now with broken families, and what's the other phenomenon that we're seeing with children happening in our zamana that we didn't have when we were growing up? What are we seeing with children? They're just checking out of this religion. It's true, isn't it? They're just checking out. Because life is just so this is why it's really important actually to understand this. So there's going to be some really ultra adult conversations. It probably will offend somebody here, but that's okay. Because sometimes you قُلِ الْحَقِّ وَلَوْ كَانَ الْمُرُّ, speak the truth even if it's bitter. So we're going to talk about types of trauma, how it affects the brain, how it affects behavior, because they're both linked, and then a few bits on just how to heal, because that's really important. But the bit on healing needs a lot more time. But we'll see how far we go. So I'll let you read it for yourself. These are definitions from Mind, really good resource. But essentially, it's a very, very stressful, frightening event, distressing event, which is very difficult to cope with. Usually, completely out of our control. Usually, and so people experience really, extreme stresses in their life. And it could be one thing, or it could be something that's continually going over a long period of time. And then there's different time. This is where it gets, apologies in advance, it gets quite sensitive. I appreciate that. The obvious one is, physical abuse. That's at any age. Physical abuse. What does that mean, physical abuse? To you? I know we're all Asian and we're used to it, but what does that mean, physical abuse? Huh? Like, striking a child is really difficult for a child to understand. And, we can talk about jawaz all you want, but ma daraba bi kaffihi sallallahu imra'atan wala waladan wala khadiman. The Prophet never struck a child, a woman, or anybody who served him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so I talk about adults. So 1 in 4 women experience domestic abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, yes, financial abuse. 1 in 5 men experience it as well. Yeah? See, eyebrows raised. Because it's not, it's huge. 1 in 4 women, and 1 in 5 men, and 1 in 6 children. It's a bad statistic. Experience abuse.
The men from the spouses in particular.
Yeah. And so I've had a case where this brother knocked on my door. He rang me. He said, really serious, no salam, no nothing, come outside. I thought something's happened. I went outside, went to his car. He's bleeding like everywhere. Face, arms, upper chest. I said, let's go deal with this guy. He said, no, it's my wife. She's just gone for me. And then he couched at my house that night. And I had to go and, but point being, it does happen to men. But why do men not talk about it? Yeah, it's like, oh my God, Point being, I'm not saying that, what I'm trying to say is that it happens to everybody. Do you understand this concept of abuse? It can happen to a man, it can happen to a woman. But the point being is that when somebody hits you that you're in a loving relationship with, well, anybody hits you anyway, but especially when it's somebody who's supposed to be your spouse, protector, lover, soulmate, whatever you want to call it, it's really hard on the soul. Forget physically, that pain will go, physical pain will go within a few hours, but the lasting effects is really hard for it to go. You say, okay, and then sexual abuse. Unfortunately, I know we're having some heavy conversations, but it's important to have open conversations, right? So when I was taught medicine in a very conventional way, and then when I had my first job as a GP, I worked in Salford for 3.5 years, and obviously there's lots of socioeconomic problems in that area, and rates of mental health problems are very, very high in Salford. And I went through first 3 months of my career, of my starting as a GP, I thought, man, I'm a rubbish doctor. I'm just chucking pills at these people and they're not getting better. Sending them for therapy and they're not getting better. So like Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah had a crisis of faith. I was having a crisis of like, what sort of a doctor am I, right? So I was at home, I remember it, like yesterday, I was at my father's house on the weekend, and I was just staring into space thinking, what sort of a doctor am I? Like, this is not medicine. This is really bad medicine, basically, right? How old? Oh, subhanAllah. 2010, so that would have made me 28. Baby. Yeah? When you hit 40, when are you 40?
Yeah.
When are you 40?
10 years.
When you hit 40, honestly, something happens to you. You wake up and you think, wow, maturity. Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he used to say youth is up until the age of 40. And he would also say that if you haven't got your relationship right with Allah by the time you hit 40, good luck. That's his milestone. So I was sat there, my father and I were thinking, oh, I'm a really bad doctor. And he had a book on the shelf called Healing Without Prozac or Freud. The Dr. David Sherwin Schreiber, he's passed away now. And his story is really funny. He was a Harvard professor, lead professor of psychiatry. He was on the ward. He got fed up of practicing conventional medicine. This old lady was on the orthopedic ward. She fractured a hip. She was depressed. The orthopedic consultant called him and said, you need to sort this lady out. He came, did his thing, went. Orthopedic surgeon bleeped him straight away. What are you doing prescribing her a dog? What are you doing prescribing her a dog? He said, look, she's fractured her hip, she's on her own, she's lost her independence, she doesn't have any self-worth. I'm giving her something to do, some purpose in her life. That's going to be much more, better than Prozac, which is an antidepressant. So he had this shift of thinking, right? Where am I going with this? He says that unless a human being sorts out 3 things in their life, they will never be happy. 3 things. And I believe him. The first one he says is trauma. That if you don't address the trauma that a human being, if you've had trauma, and many people have, if you don't address it, forget it. If you don't address it, what? Forget it. So at that time, I started asking my patients who came in with mental health problems about their past childhood, because you have to go all the way back to the beginning. And repeatedly, many were telling me really heavy traumatic events, in particular sexual abuse. So at that time, I don't know if she's still there, there was a doctor called Dr. Kate Helene. She was lead psychologist for the whole of Manchester. Brilliant psychologist. So I called her because I was having this pattern. I said, look, Kate, this is happening, and should I ask everybody with a mental health problem first presentation, or they're not getting better after 6, 7 types of medication? Should I ask them if they've been abused? Without any hesitation, she said yes. And then I hesitantly said, what about sexual abuse? She said yes. And she told me about an organisation called Survivors Manchester, which is for men, specifically, who have experienced sexual abuse. So it's pretty bad. That's an understatement, really. So you're talking people who their whole life, they're up to their 60s. I know we're having ultra-adult conversations here, but I've got 70-year-old patients who are still struggling with childhood sexual abuse from their father. Understand? So that's another one. Child maltreatment. Essentially what that means is abusing a child in the ways that physical, sexual, neglect, verbal, emotional. That's another type of, any age really, but children especially. Illness can be really traumatic for people. If you go from being completely independent. Yesterday I heard of a young boy, 20 years old. When on paper, everything's going for this bro. He looks beautiful. He's super smart, super intelligent, super healthy, super athletic. The type that becomes like the trophy child. And yesterday, one of my friends was telling me he has a very significant a life-changing diagnosis. That, inshallah, it won't make dua Allah gives him mukammal shifa. But potentially it could affect his physical ability to function. You understand? So illness can, and when you lose your independence, that whole process can be really traumatic for somebody. Really traumatic. And then racial abuse, people forget this. It's still a problem. Like the football was on today, yeah? It's true, isn't it? We still, in the FA, they're talking about how to handle racism. Still a problem. Right, anybody here, hands up, anybody here who's been affected by racial abuse? What does it feel like?
When I was young, people say stuff like this, just as a way of dealing with it, just pretend it's not gonna.
Yeah, but did you care?
Probably deep down.
Yeah, you would.
You're young though, aren't you? You're a child, aren't you?
You would. It's impossible to ignore. Like you have this degree of hatred for me, and diminishing my status as a human because of the color of my skin. Nothing else. That's pretty hard to swallow. You know that. That's really hard for a human being to swallow. And so that's traumatic. And also we forget loss. Especially the closer you are to someone, it can be really traumatic. And for me, you've heard a few of my health talks, but I bang on about this a lot. For a child, psychologists are clear about this. Probably the most significant traumatic element or experience a child goes through is witnessing their parents at each other's throats. is bonkers traumatic. Why? So children, what they see parents as well. Let's you know, I don't like just talking. Let's make it. What do parents see their children as? Caregivers, guardians, a place of safety, place of love, place of security. You know, when they can just come home and just be themselves, and no one's going to judge them, no one's going to say anything. You know, just gonna, right? That's what the home should be like, right? If a child comes home from school, right, mum comes home from work, dad comes home from work, right, and you know, in the evening it can be quite chaotic, can't it? You've got to, you know, sort their food out, go have a shower. You've got to go to madrasa. You know, this is right. It's already stressful as it is in the moment, right? Imagine what a child experiences if they just see mum and dad shouting at each other. Imagine what a child thinks if the child sees mum or dad cursing each other or just saying horrible things or swearing at each other. Or imagine what they feel like if they see one hit the other. It's probably one of the top traumatic things a child experiences in their entire life. So go back to the whole concept of, you know, when we talked about 1/3 of Muslim marriages fail. That's one problem. The second problem is Muslim marriages that survive is the toxic relationship that's in there between mum and dad. Destroys children. Destroys children. I know a family, one of the worst cases I've seen of toxic relationship between husband and wife. One of the worst that I've seen. Anyway. The children are self-harming as a way of coping. Do you get me? Like literally self-harming with blades as a way of coping because they can't do it. So then you've got that problem. Then you've got another problem that's come into our generation is parents are there but they're not there. What do I mean by that?
Yeah, physically there.
Well, there's two types. It's called absent parenting. The father or mother, or both, want goodness for their child, and they mean well. Their intentions are sound, but they're never there because they're too busy earning. Because they want to have a good life for their child, but they're never there. Their children are raised by after-school club, nursery, babysitter, childminder, etc. They're never there because they're working their ass off. Pardon me. Sorry, guys. I know this decorum doesn't dictate me talking like that, but my apologies, right? They're working their butts off and they're not there. What's the other type of absent parenting? This one? I know, because I'm Gujarati. Gujarati. What's the other type of absent parenting? They're physically there.
Absent, being not like
Yeah, well, what's causing them to be absent?
they put devices in.
This. Well, I've not got a smartphone. Ditch it, right? I'm telling you. You're like Snake's still on there. You can't beat Snake. Ditch it. You've got parents who are not there with their kids. And a child needs the guardian caregiver to help them calibrate and just get through life, help them grow. But parents are just too busy watching YouTube shorts or Insta or Twitter or whatnot. They're just not there. It's soul destroying. If your child sat there saying, Abba, guess what happened today? Guess what happened today? I was playing football and I got past the left wing and then I got through midfield and I scored top corner. And dad's there going, yeah, that's great, man. Dad, check this video out, man. The child is going to know my dad doesn't care. He couldn't give a flying falafel about me. And they'll pick it up as the years go on. And then, you know, I'll tell you an interesting story about me, because I was an absent parent during a period. Yeah. but the reason why I put this in, because people forget this, how important this is. And for me, the message I want to give was specifically with this, and I'll come back to it to the end. Muslim families, wallah, you have to make it work. You owe it to the kids. The kids did not, you know, you chose A, to get married, B, to have children. Do you understand? Allah's created a sunnah in this world of cause and effect. Right? The children came by virtue of you. You have to make it work for them. You owe them. Now you get asked about this on Yawm al-Qiyamah. You owe them. You have to make it work. There's no ifs or buts here. There's no debate. There's no maneuver. You have to make it work for your children. And there are so many So many, like it's like a generational thing out there. There's a book, right? Pardon me, I know this. We're not in a masjid, so I probably be a bit more relaxed, right? But I know there's some ahbab here and people of piety, but there's a book called How Not to F Them Up. Yeah. How not to F them up, because you can F them up by virtue of you and your stupidity. And we all do it. Like if we get time, I'll give you some of my examples of stupidity. The good news is that you can repair damage very easily, because children are beautiful creatures. They forgive like that in an instant. They'll forgive you. But point being, we have to make it work, and don't underestimate the impact of certain things that you do, your interactions with people, or if you've experienced trauma, how that impacts you going forward. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. Okay, so if somebody experiences trauma, the types of trauma that we talked about, how does it impact a child, and then how does it have an enduring, lasting impact as the years roll on into adulthood? Then what you'll see, inshallah, is that patterns of behavior will start to make sense. Patterns of behavior will what? Start to make sense. Okay, so if a child experiences, anybody, any age, but worse if it's a child, because a child's brain is, generally they say a boy's brain doesn't fully develop, a male's brain doesn't fully develop until 25. And a woman's brain develops when they're up to 18, they develop really, really, like, up to where it should be. Boys take 25 years. That's why they say girls do better at school, college, uni than boys. And why boys do dumb things until they're 25. Because this part of the brain, the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex, has to do with decisions and rational thinking, takes a little bit longer. Okay, so if somebody experiences anything traumatic, it affects this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. Okay, if that occurs, a human being finds it hard to make rational decisions. In other words, what sort of decisions do they make? Impulsive. Now, let me ask you something. What else causes the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex, to shrink? Yeah, I told you last time. See if you remember. Yeah, Maulana, my voice don't go that far, man. You have to sit here. What else causes this part of the brain to shrink?
Using screens.
Screen time, or anything that's addictive in nature. So drugs, but screen time especially. This part here. Okay, then you got the amygdala, which is the part of the brain. I don't think so. It's too small. But the amygdala is the part of the brain which is basically your fight or flight. So if somebody experiences a stressful thing, the way Allah's designed the brain is for survival. It's to either, if someone comes up to you and wants to, have beef with you, it's either fight or I'm going to run. That's how the brain is wired. Okay, that's the amygdala, right? If somebody's experienced something traumatic, that's hyperwired. You're always on edge, and rightly so, because they've experienced something really, really traumatic. Take an example of somebody who's had a car accident, a very traumatic one. They're going to be wired when they're on the wheel, because they're worried about it happening again. They're going to be hypersensitive. That's normal. That's normal, right? So I've got patients who have been abused by family members so badly, they want nothing to do with that gender. Ever. You understand? And that's how it has it, because they just can't trust. They just cannot trust.
Has that being wired, that being active, has that got anything to do with stress hormone?
Cortisol?
Yeah. When that's constantly present?
I don't think so, because cortisol comes from the adrenal glands. I mean, it might do. I'll need to look into it. But cortisol, like if you get punched in the face, right? And if you're going through, say, loneliness, which is traumatic for people, just being alone, what's the difference? It's the same amount of cortisol, but when you get punched in the face, that cortisol will drop within 2-3 hours to normal baseline levels. But if someone's experiencing loneliness or ongoing stress, that cortisol is the same level as being punched in the face. The difference is all the time. So that more knackers your body physically. But I'll look into that if it contributes. It must do, may do. Hippocampus, okay, that's memory. Now, if anybody has had a traumatic event, they find it hard to distinguish between past and present. Okay, now hold on to these three things and look what happens to a child, right? When they go through anything traumatic. So if someone has been through something, so if a child hasn't been through anything traumatic, they've had a wonderful childhood, or they've been through something traumatic, and their parents, caregivers, guardians, whoever they are, have helped that child navigate through that trauma, they can end up being secure. I'll let you read that for yourself. That's like, I mean, you must see, have you seen a child who's content, engaged, comfortable with relationships, confident? You have. What is the key? They've got wonderful parents and or a family network and or an elder or a caregiver around them to support them and calibrate. Now hold on to this when we talk about healing. Okay, remember this secure when we talk about healing, really important. Okay, then there's 3 other types, okay? I'll let you read them. You can probably recognize people in your life right now who fall into these categories.
Disorganized, another word for fearful, avoidant.
Yeah, well, avoidant is one specific thing, but disorganized is like a fearful, I ain't doing this. And the key message is that the fear of hurt again and rejection, it just can't cope with it. And what's important is that if you look at though nearly 50% of those who are classed as disorganized, it's directly because of abuse or neglect. So when you've got a child, right, a young child, and you have you ever seen this, a young child who just has been labeled naughty boy? You've seen that, right? Yeah. Either in school, madrasa, home, family networks. He's like, he's naughty. You know, the one kid just flies off the wall at anything. Doesn't necessarily takes risks, doesn't listen to anybody. That could be his personality, but likelihood is that there's something going on here. And then we give them these labels. And what's the problem with labels?
Sticks.
To a child, it sticks. It sticks. Right, let me tell you a story. Right, I had this one patient. She was experiencing depression and anxiety type symptoms. Right, it was at that time when I read that book, Healing Without Prozac or Freud. So I went back. So the 3 things: one was trauma, the other was purpose. If a human being doesn't have a sense of purpose, forget it. And the 3rd thing he said was, if a human being doesn't feel unconditionally loved, it's a human need to feel unconditionally loved, not by the whole world. You don't need to be on social media. You just need your parents, your children, your spouse, your children, your brothers. You don't even need any friends to feel loved. And remember, the most like buzz out of your life will come with intimate relationships, and the most pain in your life will come from intimate relationships if you don't get it right. So I probed her, and she was experiencing anorexia. So I said to her something, and this was ajib because she was married to, she was in a long-term relationship with a man, and when they were as a couple, like bullets would bounce off them. Like wonderful couple. Dunyawi wise, everything was there, right? But she was experiencing anorexia, and she felt depressed and anxious. So I probed probably 3 months, and she said, when I was 7 years old, I'm going to give my age away now. When I was 7 years old, I was lying on the floor, so on my belly, like, you know, the screen's up like that, watching the TV like this. And I was flapping my legs in the back. I was 7 years old. My father, walking through the room, you know, just like an off comment. My father said to me, hey, thunder thighs. Have you heard that term? No, that's proper 80s, that. Sorry. So that's too far. My voice don't go that far. Come forward. It's okay. I prefer if it doesn't go social media because you can have more richer conversations. But basically, thunder thighs means fat thighs. Thunder thighs in the 80s was the term we used to use for fat thighs. This young girl, and she said, it broke me. I said, why? It's just a flippant comment. She goes, that's my dad. He called me fat. And she's 25, 26, and she's, even though her lifelong partner, she's been with him for years, saying, keeps telling her, you're the most beautiful woman ever. It doesn't matter. My dad called me fat. So I believe I'm fat. So now, how about this, right? One of my biggest regrets of not doing something. I was in Medina airport, queuing up to go into the plane, right? And there was this family in front of me, and the father says, "Where's the boarding pass? Where's the boarding pass? Where's the boarding pass?" And these little innocent butchers, like 6, 7, 8 years old, 10 max, whole family of them, right? So a massive group of family, right? And when I said, but I don't know, you didn't give it me, and uncle, you didn't give it me. So he turns around and he goes, are you all stupid? Are you all thick? Like, he's clearly stressed out because he hasn't got his boarding pass, right? He's lost it. It's not the kid's fault. But he's saying, are you stupid? Are you thick? Are you? And they're like, you look at their eyes and they're like, you know, that broken heart, like tears nearly streaming. Thinking, what are you calling me that for? And then my guy found it in his bag. I hope he apologized. But a part of me was like, I need to say something, man. This guy's like really like going into this kid for no reason. But when there's a man now, if you say something, people just, who are you? You know,
Punched in the face.
you probably get punched, exactly, isn't it? Someone, when a man say, you know, don't say anything to anybody because you don't know what they're on. Do you know what I mean? So that's the point I'm trying to make, is that don't underestimate that if it's not calibrated at that point when it occurs, then the risk of falling into these three types is very, very, very high. And if it's not calibrated in childhood through support, therapy, love, guidance, etc., etc., look what happens. There's a lot to read. There's a lot on here, but I'll let you read it. It can lead to problems of cognition, which is thinking, attention, learning, systems of meaning, so even doubting life and your spiritual matters. It can. And we'll come to this when it comes to healing. Relationships. The bottom line is that it affects relationships. So we talked about at the beginning, why is it that 1/3, according to some muftun, why is it that 1/3 of Muslim marriages are failing? So we were talking at the beginning that, you know, when you've got someone, Maulana, where you know them, wonderful human being, and maybe your sister knows this sister, wonderful human being, and you're like, you know what, say to your sister, let's get these two married, they're really good people, good family, good. They get together and they don't last. So I understand personality clashes, I get that. It's impossible for everybody to get on with everybody. It's impossible. But surely it can't be 1/3 can't get on with each other. They like get together and they just can't live together. There's no like meaningful relationship that's there. And so what we're seeing as clinicians is that actually when you go back to the beginning about what's actually happened in this human being's journey through life, yeah, what's happened, if each party understands that, it makes it a lot more easier. So I went to help a couple once, and man, these guys were at each other's throats. At each other's throats. So I went to the house and I said, right, go on, what's the beef? And the brother said, she never answers the phone. I said, look at all your faces. You're like, what? What a petty argument. So back in the day when we had home phones, wasn't too long ago. They're still there, you know, home phones, right? So I said, why? She said, I can't say. I said, well, I'm not leaving until you tell me. I can't say. I'm not leaving until you tell me. I can't say. So I'm a stubborn little git. I said, right, get the tea on, I'm not going anywhere. So she said, okay, I lost my mother and I have no recollection. I was that young. 7, 8 years old, I'm at home. I was raised by my uncle, my dad's brother. I'm at home, phone rings. I pick up the phone, and my uncle says to me, Betty, I'm at the hospital, your dad's passed away. Very traumatic. Agreed? Very traumatic. Of course she's going to find it hard to pick up the phone. Of course. And his brother's face dropped. I was like, why did you not tell me? How can I tell you? It sounds stupid, but it doesn't. And so if you understand behavior, your behavior, and you understand what makes you tick, what makes me tick, and then learn to calibrate that, half of the bakwas arguments will be like nothing. But we'll come to that. So it leads to this. Inconsistent and inadequate attachment relationships may also lead to external behaviors, aggression, but I see this a lot actually. When someone's losing control of a relationship, because people enter into a marriage and they have this dream, I'm going to have the perfect marriage. I'm going to have this wonderful 40k wedding. Well, I'm in love when you're not. You only met the guy a couple of months ago, right? It's true though, isn't it, right? Yes, Allah puts muhabba into a human being's heart through nikah, la shakka biha. But how many years does it take to actually form a meaningful relationship? Any ideas? According to psychologists anyway. Illa mashallah, Allah can do anything He wants. But generally Allah has a sunan. How many years does it take for a human being to develop a solid relationship with someone? 8 years. So if you're married, any young brothers who are married, when you get to 8 years and you've passed that hurdle, inshallah you'll be fine. But it takes a long time. It takes a long time, to form a relationship. You get me? So what happens when a human being, when you've got a couple who are at each other's throats and they're losing control, man, this relationship's not working. If you see one who's just overtly aggressive and bullyish, they're doing that to keep that relationship, because that's one way of control. Being aggressive, being the aggressor is control. What the perpetrator doesn't realize, the one who's being aggressive or bullyish, is that actually, this is what I am because of something that's happened in the past and I can't see it. So remember the part of the brain that deals with memory? They can't work out past and present. And then the second bit of the slide, as a result, people feel fearful, helpless, and it can go through their whole life. And then the smallest of things, they can interpret it as being the most stressful thing in the world, when it's not. Okay? So then if it's not kept in check or calibrated, then this happens. People lose their perception of what reality is. They don't feel safe. Everything's a danger. Everything is the end of the world. Panic, right? Like cortisol, stress hormones will be flying through the body all the time. Fight, fright, or freeze. So have you seen that? Stressful situation, and then some people, they freeze. Can't do it. Don't speak, don't move, they just sit there like that. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. Creates itself a helplessness, hopelessness, relationship problems that we talked about, and serious behavioral problems as well. So not just in childhood, in also adulthood as well. So then you end up with this. So I'll let you read it. So if you look at the secure one, that's where we want to be. In any given situation, warm, caring, trusting, forgiving.
Anxious. There was another term.
So if you go back,
What was that?
ambivalent is the same as anxiousness, basically. But if you look at that, this is where you want to be secure. It's important to have healthy boundaries in relationships. That's another topic. Managing someone's emotions, being responsive to the other person, honest and open. When I see secure, who do you see? I'll tell you who I see. Who do you see when you see secure? Who comes to mind straight away? The Rasul, the most perfect of human beings. And we'll come to that again when we come to healing. And this is an important bit to remember as we go along, right? But if you look at adulthood, look what happens. Fear of closeness. So some people, I had one couple, this guy was big, threw his wife in, that long-term partner. I literally threw her in. She's off her head. She's always screaming, shouting, never happy, this, that, and the other, right? Sort her out, right? Took me months and months to go down the whole trauma. What is it? And she was obviously bawling like a baby, and rightly so, bichari. And she was sexually abused as a young woman. And she said, I find it hard to get intimate. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? It makes perfect sense. She said, I've been sexually abused. I find it hard to get intimate. I just can't. I mean, there's no children here. I can't have sex.
Would that be disorganized or anxious?
So that's avoidant. So she's fear of intimacy because of what's happened before. I said, have you told him? She goes, I can't. Why? He'll leave me. Fear. How do you know he's going to leave you? That's what everybody does. What do you mean? And the conversation, it's just opened up. So then we did some work on sorting it out. MashaAllah, she's got 2 kids now. Happy as Larry. Both of them. So the point being is that when you address root problems, it takes a lot longer, but the lasting effects are longer as well. But you have to go through it. But look at this, right? Extreme independence, emotional distance. She was just, and then you got the anxious one, who's just hyper anxious. That's one possibility of heading towards it. And then you got the disorganized one, where just a human being that's all over the place. They can skip, not the secure, They can go between them, of course you can. But the point being, the brain isn't wired to think rationally. The brain is more wired to be on the fight or flight response in any given situation. And the brain can't differentiate between present and past. So, mathalan, if something comes up like, you're talking about something and then it turns into an argument, often what happens is that the human being is not going ballistic missiles over a table that's in the wrong place in the room. What's happening is that they've gone back to their subconscious and they haven't dealt with their traumas and it's coming out. But they can't see it for the life of them because no one's helped them during that period. Does that make sense? So if you look at human beings, this is what psychologists say, by the time you hit 35, your brain is wired. The good news is that Allah's made the brain to rewire it at any point. It's called neuroplasticity, where you can learn a skill any point of your life. You can undo things in your brain at any point in your life. That's just the way Allah's made it. And what's proof of that? If you look at our tradition, what's total proof of that? That the brain can rewire itself at any point. What's proof? Who's proof of this in our tradition? Sahaba. Now look at where they were and what they became. The world will never be the same again because of these individuals who rewired, if you want to use the modern day terminology, rewired their brain. Look how I was reading about Fudala Ibn Umair radiallahu anh, who wanted to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ. Where? During Tawaf. And the Prophet ﷺ put his hand on his heart and he said, before the Prophet ﷺ let go, he became the most beloved human being on the planet. And I wanted to murder him. So that's proof, right, of possibility. But what they say is that by the time you're 35, your brain is wired through life experiences, memory, habits, behaviors, values, notions, you name it. It's all, so when you look at someone's behavior, 95% of it is subconscious. 90 to 95%. The rest is in conscious state. So when things erupt, so what I say to patients is, when they come in and like, if they'll say, I'm just a horrible person at home, or I'm screaming and shouting all the time, and I'm mad, and this and that, and this and that. I say to them, it's not about the bills, it's not about you can't go on holiday, it's not about you can't afford this, it's not about that it doesn't take you out, it's not about, I say, what's really bothering you? And they say, what do you mean? I say, has anything happened to you not nice in your childhood? And it all comes out. And then this one sister, she said to me at a course a seminar I was delivering, she said, before you start, I just want to say thank you. I said, why? She said, you gave a seminar on anger. And I came home and I said to my children and my husband, I went to this seminar about anger and I'm going to sort my anger out. I'm really sorry. And she said, my children and my husband, their face dropped with the face of, the face of relief. Oh, thank God for that. And she said, thank you so much. And she went and sought help and she went back to the beginning. What was bothering me? What's really bothering me? And you'll find 9 out of 10 times it's to do with something that's happened in childhood.
So, what's the best way of a person to delve into this conscious and understanding?
Yeah. So.
And I had a question about the previous slide as well. Sorry about that.
Which one? Go on.
I had 2 questions in the previous. Yeah. So, if you look at avoidance,
yeah.
the bottom one is logical. That's compared to all of the other qualities.
Yeah.
That seems to be a positive trait.
It can be. It can be. But it's linked with overtly independent.
Okay.
Sometimes you can be too logical.
Okay.
And life is not black or white.
As in they can't access the emotional side of things.
It's just like, take it or leave it. Those sort of people.
Okay. That doesn't help at all.
No. Like, let me give you an example. Once the Prophet came home, right? Let's just use terminology without diminishing the status of the Prophet so we masakin can understand. Right? He had a job and that was to call people to Allah. Right? He came home from work. Came through the door and Khadija radiallahu anha said to him, something's happened. Your face ain't the same. So you and I come home from a hard day's work, what would we say to just be honest, what would we say to our wives? And we're like stressed out. No one will judge you. I know you're on social media, but no one will judge you, just say it. How would you respond? What would be a typical man response?
Leave me alone.
Like, get out of my face, man. Leave me alone. You don't know what day I've had. The Rasul Sallallahu paused, turned round, went out of the house, sorted himself out, came back in with a huge smile, and she went, there you go. I think that's my husband. And you know, whenever I read about the Prophet Sallallahu and these sort of events, that's when I see man. You know, man. True man. Salawat Rasulullah. Huh? Kamil insan. You had a question, Adhifa?
Yes. So,
No, Muhyiddin?
is it true that the fearful, possible that disorganized is the most complicated?
Yes.
And also, it's kind of in between the avoidant
Yeah, and the anxious.
and the anxious. So it's. So I read something a couple months ago, and it was basically saying you either slide more towards the avoidant or you slide more towards the anxious.
Usually the ones who are disorganized are the ones who've had some serious, nasty stuff done to them. And then they're labeled in adulthood as having personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, where they really find it hard to form meaningful relationships with people, and everything is a fight and everything's a drama, everything. But the core thing is that because they've been hurt, and usually by people of trust, and they have a sense of rejection, they fear for the life of them that everybody's going to reject me. So talk about marriage. When you enter that person into a marriage, when there's something normal, right, but it just explodes into a massive argument, what the one who's disorganized doesn't see, that their behavior, what they're trying to do is they go into this aggression, bullying type personality to keep control of that person because they don't want to fear rejection. So they use that strategy to just keep them there. Whereas what they don't realize is that more long term, they're just causing that person to become more and more distant. And what can happen with that disorganized is that it's either my way or the highway. I'm always right, you're wrong. And it's very, very difficult actually to manage it. But the good news is that it's not. It can be repaired. It can be repaired. So anybody who's got children here, I mean, don't do it. Make a promise to yourself, never ever to raise your voice at your children. Like I know families where they've told me my father has never raised their voice at me. Never. Never. But I love him so much I feel ashamed to disobey him. Can you imagine that? So, that my father has never raised, and so make a promise that like if you look at the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and how he was with children, I think we'll come to that. But the point being is that really important to make these sort of promises. That with like I'm not going to raise my voice, to my wife, and wife, I'm not going to raise my voice to my husband because I love him. And if we get into a situation where there's some really serious because of course you're going to have serious conversations in your marriage. Like if you think you're going to get through your marriage and it's going to be all rosy and lovely, it ain't going to happen. That's not life. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, he was asked by his students, have you ever argued with your wife? He said, no, never. And my wife never argued with me. And they said, how is that even possible? He goes, because when she went off on one, I actually used to zip this thing. Wouldn't say a word back. And when I went off on one, she wouldn't say a word back. And therefore, by default, we never had an argument. But make a promise, never, ever, under any circumstances, I don't care. Like, I don't care what the situation is, never in front of the kids. Ever in front of the kids. Ever. Like Gabini, just don't do it. It just destroys them. The good news is, if you do, and you slip because you're a human, and that's okay, because Allah's made us that way. If very, very quickly, and when I mean quickly, within 20 minutes, you sit your children down and you say, you know what, I'm really sorry that you had to witness that. That was wrong. That was wrong. I'm sorry, and I'll never do it again. What's the wrong way to apologize?
Say sorry, but then.
Sorry, but you know what, I was stressed out with work and your mom's being a bit, That's not how you apologize. You say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I'm never going to do it again.
Own the problem. Own the mistake.
You know Sheikh Yunus rahimahullah, once, Hazrat Yusuf Sahib, he said it was Jum'ah, and I was a student, and Sheikh Yunus rahimahullah wanted to start the Ibtida of Abu Dawood Sharif. So the what used to happen at Friday was that after Jumu'ah, Hazrat would have food with Sheikh Zakaria rahimahullah. So Sheikh Yunus announced that we're going to start Ibtida of Abu Dawood Sharif after Jumu'ah. Come and start. So Hazrat Yusuf Sahib was like, okay, yeah, so my ustad as well, I'll listen to him, I'll go. So as Hazrat Sheikh rahimahullah is eating, Sheikh Zakaria, he's saying, where's Yusuf? I said, oh, Sheikh Yunus has started Abu Dawood, so he's just gone there. So Hazrat Sheikh wrote to Sheikh Yunus, why are you making my students more tired than they already are? Like, what's up with you, man? You've got too much josh. So Sheikh Yunus wrote back, I accept that I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. I accept that I made a mistake, I'm sorry, and I'll never do this again. It made Sheikh Zakaria rahimahullah so happy, so happy, so happy. He wrote to him and he said, don't open this until 40 years from now. He said, don't read this letter until 40 years from now. So Sheikh Yunus rahimahullah, he became really ill and he thought he was going to die. So this was just before the 40 years, and he asked his khadim, I've got this letter in my room, go and get it me. And he opened it and it said, by the time you read this letter, you would have surpassed me. By virtue of what? The beautiful etiquette he had of, I'm sorry, I accept what I've done, I'm sorry, and I'm never going to do it again. If you repair it, children will forget about it. Children will what? They'll forget about it. That's the key. And the same thing with adulthood as well. That if there's a sense of, it's not like, it's about moving away from, when we talk about breaking the cycle and healing, what it is that it's about moving away from, it's just giving people space and compassion, and they'll be able to work it out themselves. So how do you do it? Okay, so this is for children mainly. If you can see this, right? Honestly, people, be there for your children. Like, you have to be there. Everybody else is raising our children apart from us. You have to be there. So we were talking earlier, right? What happens in your, like Ghazalian crisis, right? When you're a doctor, what happens in your career? Everybody around you is telling you, do this, do this, do this, climb the ladder, the echelons of being a doctor, right? So I was getting my finger in loads of pies. And who at the sacrifice of who?
Children.
My children. So they're very young at that time, right? And 3 things happened. So Ishaq, my brother, he got married, I think, 8 years ago, right? So Isa would have been 10. Sarah would have been, she would have been 7. And my youngest brother Ishaq got married at Sheikh Salim's place in Leicester. After the nikah, I went to the foyer, and then my brother said, Sheikh Salim's calling you. So I went, and Sheikh Salim's got a big entourage, hasn't he? He has, hasn't he? Like, there's 20, 30 people behind him. And then he says to me, very serious, it's a nikah, it's supposed to be happy, isn't it? Very serious, he goes, where are your kids? I went, I'll go get them. He goes, I'll go get them. So he made Isa stand here and Sarah stand here. And he's pointing at me, like, in front of everybody, he's pointing like this. He said, listen to me. Nothing comes before your children. No career, your wealth, your parents, nothing comes between you and your kid, before your children. And I'm like going red in the face thinking, what the heck is going on here, man? I didn't do anything, but I did, right? And then he said, why am I saying this to you, Zakaria? He said, because when your son hits 16, when your daughter hits 16, and then you want them to engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they'll just turn and say, why are you telling me, you weren't interested in me for all these years? Why should I listen to you now? And that's why it's so important to be around people of Allah. Why? Because they see things, ittaqu firas al-mu'min, beware of the insight of the believer. فَإِنَّهُ يَنْظُرُ بِنُورِ اللَّهِ, they see with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He could see something in me. And that's why it's important to make yourself available for him. And a few days after, I had a dream of Hazrat Sheikh rahimahullah, Sheikh Zakaria. I was picking him up at a train station. So I went to pick him up. He hugged me, he kissed me, and then he said to me, pay attention to your kids. Aapka bachcha ka khayal rakhna chahiye. I woke up, I thought, oh, what's happening? And then the week after, I was in Majlis with Sheikh Yusuf Rahimullah, and he said, Bhai Zakaria, idhar aao. And he told me to stop everything. No durus, no this, no talks, no this, no that, stop everything. And the rest is history. So it's about make yourself available with your kids.
You didn't go on the 13-year trip.
Huh?
You didn't go on the 13-year trip.
What's the 13-year trip? Imam Ghazali is no chance. Give them time. Give them time. And if they are upset with something, just allow them to express their feelings without judging them, without trying to fix it. Without what? Without judging them and without trying to fix the problem. Just let them absorb so they know that they've got someone to talk to you about. And my parents ain't going to judge me. They're not going to call me stupid. They're not going to call me an idiot. You're being silly. They're not going to just validate their feelings so that they know that, I've got my mum and dad here. That's cool, man. I don't need anybody else. Otherwise, who do they validate their feelings with? Who? And get involved with them. Like if they're interested in things that you ain't interested in, it's fine. You're going to have to learn to engage with what do they want to engage with. And honestly, there's nothing better than spending time with your family doing nothing. There's nothing better. Phones away. And we don't have a television, and don't have a television. Get rid of it. If you have it, turn it off, right? And just doing nothing as a family. It's just sometimes they're the best moments. When you've got a secure relationship with someone, you can be in the room with them for hours and hours and not say a word and feel comfortable. There's no uncomfortable feeling here. That's when you know that, this person is solid. Don't have to worry about it. There's no uncomfortable behavior here. And you can do that as adults as well. You can do that if someone is in a relationship and they recognize that this person's behaving in this sort of a way, is not secure basically. Okay, what do I do? Make yourself available. The easy thing to do is, she's going off on one. Forget that, man. I'm just going to go on YouTube and chill. I'm just going to, that's the wrong thing to do. It's about sitting down, make yourself available. Look, I can see that you're angry here. Should we talk about it? I'm going to listen. And you don't try and fix it. You just try and absorb, understand, go with the flow. You just watch what happens. Just watch what happens. So that's one methodology. The other one is, and I believe this, that it's really important for human beings, if you've experienced trauma, to seek treatment. Like you should. Seek treatment. And, when I see treatment, be holistic. So everybody knows me here. You have to get your diet right with everything. Even mental health. And it's just 2 rules. Avoid processed foods, junk foods, microwave foods, oven foods, have real foods, and go low carb, high protein. That's the equation. But you have to have lifestyle measures. You have to be physically active. You ask people, who are physically active, do you feel good? They'll say yes. You have to be physically active. There's no ifs or buts here, right? So you have to make lifestyle changes, right? And also you have to seek therapy. And there's different types of therapy out there, but it needs to be done. But the key message I want to give here is, because I say in the article, didn't I, from Guardian, that there's a lot of charlatans out there right now. And they are blagging the world that they've got they've got the ability to help people when they're not. There's loads out there. And I'm not saying this with with any evil intent, but including those who pitch themselves as being Muslim Islamic counselors, making like they've been on this access course online, 3-4 months, certificate, boom, I'm a Muslim counselor. No experience with patients. There's 2 things in medicine, right? You have hypothetical deductive modeling, which is all your theory, right? The bookwork that you've done. Then you have pattern recognition. Your case is that you see over and over again, the patients that you see over again. You develop a pattern. It takes 10 years to reach mastery, which is 10,000 hours, of all your theory and pattern recognition of patients' presentations and how they respond to your conversations. To get it to marry up, it takes 10 years. But you've got people out there who have been on some small access course, hardly any patient exposure, and then dealing with people with serious problems, and they're making a monumental mess. And these aren't my words. These are Muslims who have been in the game of psychology for decades. And they're seeing I'm not saying all, because there's some very good ones out there. But there's some you just think, wow, like making a mess and messing with people and charging like goodness me, rinsing people.
So for the layman, for the common person, how would they filter out who would be good? What sort of things should they look out for?
Yeah. So when you're like paying for a service, you say, okay, how many years have you been trained for? How many patients have you seen? And give me some real feedback from people who have seen you, because that's open. And if someone's open about that, they've got nothing to hide. Do you get me?
Yeah.
And you have every right to, especially when you're paying for a service. So how would you feel if you saw me as a doctor and you asked me, how many years have you been a doctor? And I say 6 months. How many patients have you seen over the past 6 months with my condition? 2. How would you feel? Confident? Khalas. Khalas. And you might not need to go to someone who's faith-based, because there's brilliant psychologists out there who can deal with trauma, for example, very, very effectively.
Would that be part of the diet?
It's part of the treatment, yeah. I think I put psychotherapy like you should. And there's different methods of doing it. There's not one way of doing it. But there's different types of psychotherapy and treatment that you want to go. And there's a role for medication as well. If someone is suicidal or psychotic as a result of this, they may well need to go on medication. I'm not anti-medication. I prescribe it myself. But if it's needed clinically, then it should be considered temporarily. So I have patients, they've been on it for 6 months, 12 months, go and seek out psychotherapy, and they're fine. Khalas, they're done. And they've had breakthrough because they've dealt with it. The key message is dealing with demons, basically. And the role of like vitamin D is really, a lot of research has been into that. B vitamins is important. Hazrat Rahimullah used to, he was very keen on ginkgo biloba for things like this. But seek advice from professionals, not charlatans and cowboys and people like that. Yeah. So he told me to do that for my own health.
So the man used to be now. He used to only eat turkey.
Yeah.
No chicken.
So that's what he said to me. He said, even in your games, Zakaria, if a human being hasn't got their diet right, he goes, the medicine that you prescribe won't work as effectively as it should work. The effectiveness of the medicine won't be as optimum as it could be if you don't get the diet right. But I'll end with this. So Muftaqi Uthmani came recently, didn't he? And he answered so many questions of mine in a few majalis. I don't know if you remember him saying this. He said it's a matter of the heart. Scientists, they say it's a matter of the brain, right? Yeah. And he said it's not. It's the matter of the heart. Because Allah always talks about the heart. And throughout the whole Quran. It never says mukh. It says qalb or fu'ad. Agreed. It's true, isn't it? It's all about the heart, right? And he answered so many questions about it, so many questions. So where am I going with this? And if I'm wrong, then you should all just say it, because this is life. We grow. No one knows everything. So there's a role for seeking therapy, having medicine and so forth, but there's a massive role of faith, like massive role of faith. And it's important to read the Seerah of the Prophet. So without diminishing the Prophet's status, and we have to be careful how we say it, but we'll use terminology so we can understand the concepts that we're talking about here today. If you look at the Prophet's life, he was born, and he never saw his father, according to the dominant opinion. He never saw his father. He passed away before he was born. How old was he when his mother passed away? And then raised by who? In fact, he witnessed his mother die, you know that? Like a 6-year-old. He witnessed Ayman Baraka burying his mother in Abwa. Then came back to Makkah. Who raised him? His grandfather, right? How many years? And then what age was he when he passed away? 8 years old. Who raised him? Abu Talib. Okay. Then the Prophet's life was pretty much uneventful between the ages of 25 and 40, right? Then, and then prophecy came. And then what happened? So prophecy came and then he was beaten, cursed, ridiculed, made fun of, effectively boycotted. And then the Muslims at that time, they were sent to the valley of Abu Talib for how many years? 3 years, eating leaves. You know, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas said that during that period, one of the first early, I think he was the 7th Muslim, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, and when he became Muslim, he said, I didn't even have one hair on my chin when I became Muslim. He was a young boy. He said, I was walking in the valley of Abu Talib, it was pitch black, so hungry, pacing up and down, put my foot on something squidgy, couldn't even see what it was, picked it up, put it in my mouth. I was that hungry. He said, to this day, I don't even know what that was. 3 years in that environment, right? Come out of that environment, Khadija felt so, the ulama say it was because of those 3 years she felt really ill. She passed away. Then who passed away after her? Abu Talib. Then the Prophet went through the year Amul Huzn. Eventually, he got so much for them, he had to emigrate from his birth town of 50 years to where? Medina Munawwara, which is what, 400 kilometers north. And not only did he just have to get up and go, he was like his head was wanted. They were outside his house waiting for him to take him out. So he had to leave because he was about to be assassinated, basically. A fugitive in those terms, right? He's just had to, because his life is in danger, so he had to secretly leave. Gets to Medina, within the first 18 months, Badr happens. Like they just want to take out the entire Muslim community. Then Uhud, then Ahzab, where they want to completely, like every tribe of Arabia comes to demolish, just get rid of these people. Now let me use that term. How many traumas did you see there? Like, we don't want to diminish the status of, but just so we understand the term, how many traumas was there? Okay. Traumatic events, right? Let's just put quote unquote. Yeah. How was the Prophet secure in his childhood and young adulthood? He had solid caregivers. He had what? Solid caregivers who gave him an enormous amount of affection and time. And ultimately, Allah was caring for him. Like, ultimately. The ultimate, you know, like, don't worry, I've got you, you know, that type of thing. And it's true because the Hazrat used to say that the reason why the Prophet went through all these phases of extreme events was that when it came to prophecy, no one could say your dad taught you, your mum taught you, your granddad taught you. It's impossible for anybody to teach him these things from a family or close unit. And it was to show the world that look what I can do with an orphan child. Look what, that's what. So then, and if you look at, let's go back to this bit here. Did the Sahaba go through traumatic events? I mean, of course they did. Can you imagine Badr and what some had to do? Can you imagine, you know, you just... Utbah ibn Rabi, and his son was Abu Hudayfa, who was Sahabi. Abu Ubaidah, right? Like witnessing my father. Like that's hard. And the Prophet ﷺ consoled him. I know you feelings because your dad just got took out. He said, look, I had lots of hope for my dad because he was an intelligent man. I was hoping that he'd become Muslim. Why were they okay at the end of it all? And this is the point that when you look at like, if you involve stories of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, Anbiya, and what they went through, and then let's codify why were they okay. And the bottom line is that it all came down to the fact that it was about being grounded with certainty that I have a Lord who knows what's good for me, who knows what's best for me, who is orchestrating my life in a way that's best for me. And the outcome at the end is going to be what's best for me. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. What does Allah say after that? وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ خَلَاص. And that's about looking at your life in a longitudinal way. That I've been through some really extreme moments here. But there's a higher purpose, there's a higher reason why Allah is doing this to me. And Allah will never harm a human being. It's ultimately for their growth to get from where Allah wants them to be. Maulana Wasiullah Rahimullah, who was one of Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi's most celebrated students, his daughter passed away when she was very young. And one of his colleagues wrote to him and said, you know, Allah must love you so much to give you this trial. Look at that mentality. Allah must love you so much to give you that trial. And Maulana Wasiullah said, I liked it so much, I'd carry that piece of paper wherever I went. And I'd put it underneath my pillow, and before I go to sleep, wherever I was in the world, I'd put it under my pillow, Safar, Hadar, and I'd read it before I go to bed.
They're scrolling.
Hmm?
That was their version of scrolling.
That was their version of scrolling. And it's about entering that this bit needs more time, but it can't be done by me. Like, you need to get a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get, you know, to get those messages across, because they live that. And if you look at some of our, you know, scholars and awliya, man, they've been through some tough times, like tough times, but they can see the bigger picture. They can see the bigger picture.
And Sharia, you see these people that they've been through,
Hmm?
they're still so, they actually are still so secure from them.
But the thing is that one thing Hazrat used to say to us a lot towards the end of his life, he used to say, you know, asking Allah for rida bil qadr, he said, मांगने की चीज़ है. And Sahaba, they used to ask that from Allah, that Allah grant me with afiyah your rida, your ridak, rida, ridak, and rida bil qadr. Grant me, like, I'm grateful for whatever you've given me. And you gave me life, that's enough. That's absolutely enough. And whatever you give me, I'm happy. We don't ask Allah for any difficulties, but and then ultimately, just being aware that whatever Allah's planned out for you is in your interest. Now, some people, I should have brought it with me. It's in Ibn Rajab's, what's it called, Mawlana Yahya? The commentary of, no, he did just one hadith. Ibn Abbas is, Ya ghulam, inni wa'alama kalimat, ihfadillaha yahfadka. He's wrote a book, Al-Iqtibas. The Turath translated it as being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a hadith in there where the Prophet says, some people, Allah grants them wealth because that's their way of them holding on to Allah. Some people, Allah grants them poverty because that's their way of holding on to Allah. Some people, Allah grants them health because that's their way of holding on to Allah. Some people, He grants them illness because that's their way of holding on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's just about understanding that with the question of, okay, why did this extreme stress happen? You look at the life of the Prophet, Allah was setting him up to be rahmatul lil alameen. What about it? We asked him, we said, why did the Prophet, if Allah says, because this is a valid question, if Allah says he's my Habib, why then did Allah put him through such extreme scenarios? And the Shaykh said to us, the Prophet was destined to be rahmatul lil alameen. Agreed? We said agreed. He said, Rahmah is the ultimate trait that a human being needs to have empathy. What's the difference between sympathy and empathy? What's the difference? Sympathy is saying, okay, yeah, it's really bad. It's difficult, money. That's difficult. Empathy is like, you know what, man, if I was in your shoes, and that'd be really hard for you. I can see that's really hard for you. Are you okay? That's empathy. So the Shaykh said to us, how can someone be destined to be rahmatul lil alameen if they don't know what it's like to go through X, Y, and Z? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ had ultimate rahmah with even his enemies, because he could just see they're just on a journey. Imagine people out to kill you, and he still had ultimate rahmah with them, because he was like, you know what, they've been through this. And all he wanted for them was, you know what, this world is temporal, you're coming to Jannah with me. This world is temporal, I'm taking you to Jannah with me. That's all he wanted. Like, you look at, like, we recently finished the chapter on the conquest of Mecca. How many people did he forgive? Who cursed him silly, beat him, wanted him dead. He was like, La tathrib alaykum, yaghfir lakum. Wa huwa arhamur rahim. It's just like, just go. It's over, forget it. And you know, when Abbas radiallahu anh brought Abu Sufyan to embrace Islam, radiallahu anh, Abbas radiallahu said, you know what, Abu Sufyan, you know, he likes to be known of, you know, just, he wants to make a name of himself, right? You know, indahum fakhr. So just say something that will give him that when he goes back. So then he said, anyone who goes to Abu Sufyan's house is safe. He didn't go, astaghfirullah, kibr is a big problem. He recognized his psychological state. He's not ready for that yet, right? So you just gave it him. Haha. And he gave it to his son so he wouldn't feel bad. Like, that's insan kamil. You know that hikmah. So the thing is that Anbiya secure ultimately because of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately. Sahaba secure ultimately because of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By virtue of who? The madrasa of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you look at the annals of history, like Imam Bukhari rahimahullah went through some extreme. The Hazrat was saying he went through a year where he just lived off one almond because he was that poor. One almond, mana. A year, for a full year, because he got extreme poverty, and there was no, why is Allah doing this to me? He realized, I'm on a journey. I'm destined. He didn't know this, but he was destined to become the greatest scholar of hadith in existence on such a big khidmah. So it's about letting go and just, like Imam Ghazali says, it's about letting go and just understanding that He's just playing out my life, and it's all good, as long as what? Your heart's connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the last thing I wanted to say, that if you were to speak to me about this a year ago, I'd have put all these scientific and psychological theories in there. But then when you look at some people in the world who have lost everything, and their heads popping out of the rubble and they're saying, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Man, that's something. That is something, isn't it? And as a result of that, how many people have picked up the Quran and looked at these people and thinking, no, what is that in them? And some people are saying it's like watching Sahaba in real time. Some ulama are saying we're watching Sahaba in real time. There's no fancy psychological theories going on there. There's no psychotropic medication. There's no lifestyle changes, isn't it? It's Iman. And that's why that needs to be part of the equation. It needs a bit more time. So do one about understanding. You should understanding the concept of Iman and how we accept. آمنت بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله والقدر خيره وشره من الله تعالى. How do we understand that? And then when you look at like the lives of greats, and then you reflect that, they've been through so much. Our problems are first world problems.
It's just reprogramming our minds.
But you can train your brain that way.
If you think about it, if you look at the Islamic narrative, إن أشد الناس بلاء
الأنبياء ثم الأمثل ثم الأمثل.
Like being tested is a sign of closeness, proximity, love of Allah Azza wa Jal. As many people who are going through it, they think it's the opposite. But the difference between adab and being full is how we deal with it.
Correct. Sahih. So if you're in a like the sister said, the men need this. If you're in a relationship where you can see that some of your behavioral traits are like this, anxious, disorganized, avoidant, okay, then take a step back and just ask yourself, what's happened to me in my life? What's really made me, what's really made me like upset? Just like, what is it? And then you've got to try and address it. And my message is address it head on. Like you have to address it head on. There's no debate here. You have to address it head on, alongside everything else that we've talked about.
Overly accommodating, again, same question as logical. Is that to the extent that it becomes negative, as in you don't have any boundaries?
Yeah. So there's this thing where it's called this. What's his name? Eric Byrne. He's a psychologist. He said that there's 5 drivers of life, and one of them is pleasing people. There's nothing wrong with pleasing people, but it's wrong when you use it to validate yourself. Because you can't please everybody, and you can please them at your expense because you're worried about what they think about you. I remember once, I won't mention his name because he won't like it, I went to a sheikh and asked him, can you come to, when I was in university, can you come to Manchester University and give a talk? He goes, no, I'm busy. I said, well, if you don't say yes to me, I'm just going to ask Hazrat Yusuf to come and ask you. And you can't say no to him. And he went, La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Because if I can't do it, I can't do it. Boundaries. Huh? Say that again. Then I convinced him, and it was the biggest turnout Manchester University ever saw. There was nearly well over 500 people came, and in separate halls, and someone took the Shahada as well. So I went and told her. He said, "How did it go?" I said, "This happened." He goes, "Ah, mashallah, right, call him once a month." I didn't tell him that. And then I said, "Why don't you come?" He goes, "No, no, no." He goes, "They won't understand a word I'm saying at university." No point in that. And the week after, somebody else came and said, "Can you come and do a bayan?" He goes, "No, no one needs to listen to the book that comes out of my mouth." I was like, "Wow, look at that ikhlas." You know, in the early days, he was given a talk, and he started, and he said, "Listen, I'm a teacher. I'm not an orator. I'm a teacher. I'm not an orator," as a, you know, in a bayan. And he said, "So if I'm not going to make you go wah wah hoi hoi, that was a wah." The door's over there. Off you go. And when I heard that, I was like, "Wow, look at that ikhlas." Now that takes a high level of self-discipline, you know, of your nafs and ikhlas to say to people, "Look, if I'm not going to make you go wah wah hi hi, there's the door. Off you go. You can go now." But the point is that if you recognize some of these traits in you, ask yourself, what is it? What is it that's made me feel this way? And address it head on. Head on, you have to address it head on. With shura, take shura with ulama, awliya, well-trained psychologists on how to approach. Don't just dive in. When I was a kid, you call me fat. It doesn't work like that. Don't dive in. Oh. Any questions?
When parents have extended ways as well, and elderly parents as well.
Elderly parents, yeah.
Obviously dealing with them would be different as well.
So elderly parents, right, learn to let go. And the reason why is because I have a friend, right, and his mum passed away. This was years ago. His mum passed away. His mum passed away. And when I went to do ta'ziyat, I said to him, "How are you? You know, your mum's passed away. You know, we share your grief and this and that." And he went quiet for a while, and then he said, "Zakaria," he said, "you know, if your mum or dad ask you to just go get a loaf of bread," he says, "no matter what you're doing, drop it and go." I said, "Why?" He goes, "You'll regret it if you don't when they go." So if you're planning on having difficult conversations with elderly parents, you could destroy their soul, and that's your parting gift. And yes, is it worth it? And the answer is always no. The answer is always no, and that's why a part of us has to learn to let go. أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. You know, and who is that revealed to? Well, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when the ifk was taking place, and Mistah, he was supporting, and then, you know, and Allah said, "Look, don't you want?" So it's about letting go, and learning to let go. That person's also on a journey. That person also had difficulties. You know, our parents, when they came here, they experienced extreme stress, because they were the first people to come here in the 60s, and they had to put up with leaving their homeland, fitting into this society, experiencing racism. My grandfather, right? He was the first group of Muslims in Gloucester, and they set up a masjid. And guess what the locals started saying? You know, these Muslims in the mosque, they eat babies. Can you imagine putting up with that? They eat babies. So my grandfather decided, let's make samosas and bhajia and call them round to see that we don't eat babies. But they had to put up with, you know, literally your windows getting knocked out every day, chased down the street, all sorts, right? So they had, and then they had to establish financially people here, and then they also had to send money back home. And that's stress. And they did all of that so we could be established here. So their brainwaves are a bit different to ours. So they had to put up with a lot of extreme stress. So they have their traumas.
Is it safe to say it would be a generational trauma then?
Of course it would be. Like, leaving your homeland is massive. Especially if it's like, you know, because you're having problems there as well, right? So when they come here, and then some of the things that they had to put up with, of course they're not going to be in a good psychological place. So of course they're going to have moments where they're going to, you know, it's not nice, but that's not their fault. Does that make sense?
Regardless of them, basically.
You make it like if you could like if Sayyidina Ali could say iltamis li akhika sab'ina udra, make 70 excuses for your brother, then what about your parents? Then what's wrong with you? You understand? And so deep down, I believe there's no such thing as bad parents. There's unfavorable parenting choices, which is different. But at the end of the day, they do it for your best interest. That's at the heart of every single parent. So if anybody, if you're elderly parents and there's like, I just want to get this off my chest, it might not be a good idea. Because if they're going, and that's the last conversation that you have, that's not a good way to go,
Is it necessary though to, if you want to deal with that trauma, to have that conversation with the person who caused you that trauma, to deal with it without doing
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's good.
without being, sexually abused or whatever.
Yeah.
Go and deal with the trauma.
No,
Person,
no, not with that. Yeah, so sex abuse is different. So like they would never. That's the wrong thing to do. But there's a method. There's a methodology of how to address that.
Can that not be applied then to someone who's like you say? Let's say the parents are elderly.
You could. There's techniques for that. There is techniques for that.
Using that technique, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why it's important to go to a really well-trained psychologist and a wali of Allah and ask for some guidance on how to handle this, especially when it's family. Especially when it's family. Because it's like, we have to see things through the lens of our tradition, of our religion, of Allah, what Allah wants from us. And when it's elderly parents, you don't want that, because if your mother and father die unhappy with you, man, you're going to have a hard time in the akhirah. Right? Khalas. It's going to be a tough time. That. Uwais al-Qarni, rahimahullah, he had the potential to become a Sahabi. He wrote to the Rasul ﷺ and said, I want to come and spend time. I've just got one problem. My mother's not well. So the Prophet ﷺ sent a message back saying, stay with your mother and be in her khidmah. Now, if that was me, I'd be like, Ma, you'll be fine, man. I got Wendy, your next door neighbour. She'll look after you. I'll be back in a few months, right? Wendy, just make sure you, right? We just get off.
Wendy's going to be cooking
Right? You just get off. You'll be like, Mom, you'll be fine, Mum, all right? Yeah. I'll be back as quick as I can. You'll be like, Ma, I see the result. And he listened to the Prophet. And when Uhud happened, subhanAllah, one of our teachers said when news came to Uwais al-Qarni that the Prophet's tooth was chipped, he smashed all his teeth. He said, how can I have a perfect set of teeth and the Rasul had one chipped? He just took his all out, according to some teachers. And then when he passed it, the Prophet said to Umar that you will see him in your time. And when you meet him, ask him to make dua for you, because his dua is a mustajab. So Umar was in Hajj, and he went with Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anh, and they met him. And they found him in a little corner on his own, just doing ibadat, right? So then Umar and Ali radiallahu anh went to them and said, who are you? And he said, Abdullah. And Ali radiallahu anh said, everyone's called Abdullah, what's your real name? And he said, who are you two asking me what my name is? Because there was no Facebook or Insta there. They didn't know what he looked like, because West was in Yemen, right? So he said, who are you asking me? And then Ali said, I beg your pardon, this is Amir al-Mu'min Umar. And he started crying. I'm so sorry. And then Umar said to him, look, the Prophet told us about you. He said, raise your hands and make dua, because your dua is a mustajab. Umar started crying. He said, what? He said, because of your khidmah to your mother, the Prophet said, there's no hijab between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Uwais was crying. Umar and Ali were both streaming with tears. And on Yawm al-Qiyamah, there's some narrations that Uwais radiallahu anh, Tabi Jalil, he'll be Jannah bi ghayri hisab. And then Allah will stop him just as he goes into Jannah and say to him, Uwais, take whoever you want in paradise with you. Whoever you point to is going to go to paradise. So Uwais will just do that. And whoever's finger he's lined up with goes with him. Because of what? Because of his parents. And so that's why I remember once somebody asked me to ask Hazrat about the nonsense jagara between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. It's weird, isn't it? Like, mother's an amazing woman, wife's an amazing woman, and then when they get together, it's like a nuclear war. Right? So the sister was going through some extreme, and so she asked me, "Can you ask Hazrat on my behalf?" So I said, "Hazrat, there's this sister, and and he listened, and he said, shook his hand and said, just tell her to do sabr. That's someone's mum. Khalas. That's someone's mum. Just do sabr." And that concept of sabr, endurance, it's gone. Why is it gone? Smartphone. You can get a flight whenever you want. You and I can swipe left right now. Swipe right, isn't it? I don't have one. Swipe right. There's no swipe right on this, bro, right? Swipe right and you can have anything delivered here, right? So when it comes to like forming like two things, there's no app, there's no YouTube tutorial, there's no quick fix. Career, and including financial stability, and relationships. The only two things where you cannot, get like that. So then when beef happens, there's no endurance, there's no sabr, there's no nothing. It's gone.
Instant gratification.
And so when it comes to like difficult situations, if it's not fixed, that concept of fixed straight away, people freak out. And then now they land their marriages over something really stupid. Whereas you want to, like, I can remember, so I like old people. So I have a bad habit or good habit, asking them for life advice. So I did a home visit on this couple. He had cancer in his 80s. They'd married for like 60 years. And she was his carer. So I asked her, I said, "What's your secret?" And she said, "Never go to sleep. If you've had an argument, never go to sleep without solving it. Don't go to sleep angry with each other." There's another 90-year-old woman. She had a cross, Christian. And I was injecting her knee with a steroid injection. She had arthritis. So I'm injecting. I said, "Look, you're 90 years old. You've seen the world. Give me some advice." So she went, "Trust God." Straight away. Trust God. I looked at her and I said, "Man, I love that, man. I'm having that." I said, you've been on the planet for 90 years. I said, "What's the most significant thing you've seen happen?" Straight away she said, when computers came out, internet came out, phones, very cognitive. She was very with it, mashallah. And she said, all these smartphones came out and this and communication became even better. She said, "I really hope that would connect us, the world." And then she took a deep sigh, looked up to the roof, the ceiling of the room, and she said, "There's just done nothing but separate us." What an intelligent woman. It's true, isn't it? Our relationships are fickle. Absolute fickle. And so sometimes when I go and spend some time with my wife and I'm out maybe getting ice cream or a meal or something, right? We'll be looking at each other's eyes with muhabba. You look down the road, down the aisle, there's a young couple your age, and they're both like this. Ooh, sharing my meal on social media. Like, there's no, it's just a pathetic relationship. It's like, what sort of relationship is that, man? Like, if you're at my house and I'm talking to you and my phone's there and it's pinging away and I'm going, yeah. Do you feel like I'm actually giving you any time of day? Might as well not be there. So imagine if you're with your wife and you wake up in the morning and you're both in bed and you're both like this. That is just a terrible relationship. Like, khalas. One brother said, I woke up in the middle of the night, looked at my wife, and mashallah, she had so much nur on her face. And I shot out of bed and she's on her phone. That happened to me in Hazrat's Majlis. So Hazrat Rahimullah, Shaykh Yusuf Rahimullah, he used to have in Hajj, first 10 days of Hajj, he'd call us and say between Maghrib and Isha, just ibadat, and he'd turn the lights off. So I was in Salah, and I got up to the verse, فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ. The story of Musa alayhi salam. He wanted to say, Rabbi arini andur ilayk, I want to see you. فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى, when Allah's Jalal came, and the mountain crumbled. So I got to that bit, right? And my eyes were closed. And then I could see this light. And for the life of me, I thought I became a wali. I was like, this is amazing. Finally, after so many years, I've done it. And I'd peek. And there's this Maulana on his phone. Honestly, I wanted to break my salah and kick him in the head. I was like, what are you doing? And I think he was watching. It definitely wasn't anything like dua or anything like that. It was some scrolling or something like that. La hawla wa la quwwata, but oh God, get rid of them. It's terrible. And it's,
I think next session we'll call it digital minimalism.
but like for you, like because you're doing links, you kind of need it.
You can't just do that.
No. But what you could do, no, what you could do is have a work phone,
Yeah.
but then have a dedicated time to do this. Like it can't be on the go. And you know what? Right, like on a serious note, like when I went to the time when I experienced it was when I went to Hazrat's Akhiri Safar in Canada. I had to take a smartphone with me to keep in touch with my family because I'm miles away in Canada, right? So I borrowed my niece's phone. Okay, and I was only there for 6 days. I think by day 3, 4, what I realized happening to me was first thing in the morning, instead of doing dhikr and adhkar, I'd go to the phone and look to see if I got any messages from my family. And I thought, this is a shaitan, man. It's just completely taking me away from my Lord Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And what I find really, really challenging, right? If you've got all these feeds, like, just know this, the human brain was not designed to take in so much information so quickly in such a short space of time. It just wasn't. That's why tadabbur is so big in the Quran. Like if you were a desert Arab, if you're living in Mecca 1400 years ago, you'd have a lot of time. Like you would. That's why Imam Shafi'i became a Hafiz at 7. He memorized the Muwatta of Imam Malik at 10. You know when he went to his class, he couldn't afford it. He was an orphan child. His father passed away, his mother raised him. He's from Gaza, Sayyid. So when he went to the Majlis of Imam Malik, he didn't have money for pen or paper because mum was a single mum. Right? So he went to his class. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu is narrating the hadith and Shafi'i is doing this. Gets to the end of his hand and he goes like that. And starts again. Gets to his little finger and then goes like that. Imam Malik's watching. I remember those classes, they used to go from Fajr to Dhuhr. It wasn't like 45-minute quick. Fajr to Dhuhr. So Malik radiallahu anhu called him. I said, Muhammad, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? He said, I can't afford pen and paper, so I was writing down the hadith. And then when I got to this bit, I ran out of space, so I went like that to rub it out, and I did it again. He's a young boy, 9 years old, 8, 9 years old. And Imam Malik says to him, narrate the hadith that I narrated. And he did it from the order, from beginning to end. But this is the thing, isn't it? So you've got all these feeds, right? WhatsApp. What have you got? WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, Insta, Snapchat. What else is there? TikTok. What else is there? TikTok, YouTube. What else is there? They're the main ones, right? You've got all them, and they're pinging at you all the time. Then you've got your messages, then you've got your phone calls all the time. I want to ask you guys, how on earth do you concentrate in your salah? Like, I find that impossible to do. Or when you're reading Quran, or if you're picking up a book of tazkiyah or history or hadith, how on earth can you stay concentrated? I can't see how that works. Now, if that's the case, how on earth can you like this bit here? How can you like be present with people around you with these devices? You can't. It's impossible. Absolutely impossible. And that's why it's like, yeah. Hey?
Off the grid or digital minimalism?
I don't know. So like have it like for work and have a business phone, but have set times that this is the time where I'm responding to my messages for this. And then your personal one, you can set a time for that as well. You don't have to be on the go all the time. Like, you're not constantly on the go, because then when it's time to like just enjoy the moment with family, friends, you just won't be present. It's not real, basically.
What do you say?
Links productivity is going down.
You know, for those people that always stick in their marriage because of their children.
Yeah.
They love to dissolve now, but they're only doing it for the children. What do you say to that?
So in the Umar was asked that. So in the Umar said, what's love got to do with it? Not his answer. So sometimes you have to hold it together for the children, Sometimes you have to. However, if there's something really serious going on, like domestic abuse especially, then it's really important actually to speak with qualified professionals and ulama about what to do.
Some say that obviously if they stick together and there's fights every single day in the household, then that would be more traumatic.
Yeah, so in certain situations, correct, yes, in certain situations they need to separate. In certain situations they need to separate because of the effects on the children. But what it shouldn't be done, it shouldn't be done off a whim. What needs to be done is that it needs to be carefully explored, try to find solutions, try to find how to make things amicable. And if last resort is just not happening, or you're at an extreme case where someone is really like just completely off the rail and there's a serious danger to someone's life, not even just life, just because of the degree of abuse, get out straight away. Yeah. It's a tricky one though, because everybody has the potential to change. You know what I mean?
After 35 as well.
Yeah, everyone has, and Sahaba are proof. And if anybody says I can't change, you have just completely cancelled out the concept of tazkiyah. Because Sahaba did. It's in our history. Sayyidina Umar was on his way to kill the Prophet ﷺ. He had his sword brandished. And he, Taha, Ma anzalna alayka al-Quran litashqa, and his heart completely changed in an instant. And look at his second Khalifa. If there was a prophet after me, it would be Umar radiallahu anhu. So the human beings have a potential of change. So I think each case has to be looked at one by one, and if you can see that, now this is dangerous, yes, absolutely yes, separate, divorce for the kids.
Question. So I think we can come to the conclusion that due to it being a generational thing as well, on that it's a problem. So there's immense demand, but we're very limited with who is competent enough to actually solve these problems, and it takes time. And so in that sense, I don't want to really look at it in like a consumerism way, but like supply and demand.
Yeah.
Demand is way up there, whereas the supply of actually competent people
Yeah.
is down here.
Yeah.
So then when somebody's not spoilt for choice, they haven't got much choice.
Yep.
Is that one of the reasons that they're going to people who are not necessarily the best fit, or maybe dismissed as charlatans and so on and so forth?
It could be, it could well be. And what I say to my patients is, look, I ask them, what do you want out of life, ultimately? And they all say the same thing. I just want to be happy. Okay? Salam. They say, I just want to be happy. Okay, what would it take to make you happy? Everyone says peace. Okay. How much do you spend on your phone? I spend £80 a month on my phone. Well, if you can invest in that, you've got to invest in your health. And sometimes, you do have to pay.
What I'm trying to say is that if somebody's not got many options out there,
Yeah.
somebody to get therapy from, and so on and so forth, they've not got many options. So they're going to somebody who's not necessarily the best, but there might be some benefit there.
There could well be, yeah.
So, that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, there could well be.
Because there's so much demand.
Yeah, it could well be. You're right. You're right. I guess the message I'm trying to give is do your homework before you go and see somebody, even if you are, in a predicament where you're not spoiled for choice. Just do your homework.
Yeah.
Because there's some real cowboys out there, cowgirls as well.
There's a lot of registers as well that therapists they subscribe to. Obviously, when a client goes, he has to filter out if he wants to see, for example, organization like ACT, nice. So they will go to them. They have to subscribe to a membership. The only thing
Yeah, you can end the live, bro, now.
therapy is not is the only thing that's one of the professions that are not regulated from a government body. So there's a lot of charlatans that can. Okay, so it's not like